I also learned this from another spiritual teacher. I was very shocked at the beginning. He and his colleague had also spoken openly about their family's experiences of violence, and everyone was shocked. And I didn't understand that and thought, what does this have to do with the topic here? And then it became clear to me that this is a basic experience of children in the 20th century and even now. So the theme works. Violence doesn't just have physical aspects, but above all the psychological desolation of children, unfortunately by parents who have no empathy. So this natural compassion for one another is so far from people. And that's that topic again, understanding the language of creation from the Russian pilgrim. Heart opening. And that creates this callous, brutal, really damaging way of dealing with each other. Relationships see the other as an object, instead of the feelings already aligning, so to speak, and you realize it doesn't fit or something like that. And then you don't have to use force. So all the greats of the 20th century who really had something to say addressed the topic of violence, including non-violence and breaking out of spirals of violence. That was Gandhi. First of all with this non-violence, but above all, even though he didn't see himself as a spiritual teacher. Marshall Rosenberg with non-violent communication. On the other hand, if you have a schizo, a schizoid, a bully, or a howler monkey, a power person. And you give it empathy. He gets really aggressive because he doesn't want anything to do with his or your feelings. Those are experiences again, so that you first have a feel for the big topics, and especially someone who has had an experience of violence or is simply locked into an unfeeling relationship and is made into an object is already violence. When you are treated as if you had no interior space, and if you are not given any opportunity to express your inner space, what is going on inside you, you simply have to function. And that's where my mysticism comes through. So I'm aware that almost everyone at this point comes from their own experience of extreme violence. Even if you don't have any physical injuries, there are pithy sayings like, don't be like that, don't act like that, or the topic of sacrificing yourself. This is all where your borders are not safe, where the other person doesn't recognize that you have a limit, so everything cross-border. And it's very important to me that my spirituality doesn't cross borders, not even when it comes to unity consciousness or something like that, but that you always have a protected border. Anyone who has experienced violence is doubly sensitized. And that also includes saying no, being aware of seemingly negative feelings, being aware of I hate or I want revenge or something like that. These are all just torn down fence posts that are still lying scattered around your cow pasture and show that someone is in the right place, has bulldozed your border, and is now trampling on the tulip bulbs in your pasture right up to the front yard of your house. So it's normal, unfortunately, this topic of experiencing violence is the downside of why people have such problems with exercising their will. They simply tore the steering wheel out of your car. Nothing else. In my dreams it was always, that was the dream series with driving. When you're driving, all you have to do is look at who's behind the wheel, which for me is almost always my mother. And where am I sitting? Mostly in the back of the car. So she says, where to go? Great. Head of department at home. And the most I can be proud of is that I'm their employee. That is, like a repair shop crew, taking care of their current problems and repairing mom, but not that they'll take care of my problems or that I can even tell them where it's been going for a long time. Dorothee Söller also once quoted Hannah Arendt in her book Fantasy and Obedience. That's the name of the small text. And Hannah Arendt writes that people are not allowed to obey because then you are eliminated as a critical subject. You take no responsibility for your actions and say, yes, it was just ordered. Then you don't have to use the word obedience, but nowadays it's the word I just worked. So that's the huge danger when people's self-control is, let's say, heavily down-regulated. And the exercise of the will shows you, as I once told my theology colleague, to what extent you are an ethical object. And he didn't really hear the size of my sentence, I think. I said that when he once invited me to a lecture in one of his courses, I was allowed to say something about ethics and mysticism. And I said that from the perspective of mysticism, the ethical subject has to be constituted in the first place. They are only subjects when they have free will, when they can control their feelings and control their thoughts. Yes, so you guessed it. This is the theological or anthropological side of the exercise of the will. And as long as they are not able to do that, but simply carry out wishes and orders, I don't see a subject there. If the subjectivity of children, let's say, doesn't play such a big role in their upbringing, if we don't get into trouble, then someone seems to have an interest in it. Cui bono? Definitely not me.